On a dusty stretch of road in Kilifi County, one quiet January evening in 2018, a tragedy unfolded that would ignite 6 years of suspicion, court battles, and whispered questions. Jacinta, known to many as Jacinta Njoki, was riding on a boda when a car slammed into them with devastating force. She was rushed to the hospital, but she never made it. Officially, it was recorded as road accident. Unofficially, the story grew darker because standing on the other end of that collision was a British national, Simon Harold Shiels, the man who claimed to be her husband. And in the years that followed, Jacinta's death would become more than an accident. It would become a battleground for property, for truth, and for justice. Jacinta was not just another name on a police report. She was a mother, a businesswoman, a woman with assets and dependents. According to court documents, she left behind biological children, nieces, nephews, and a man who insisted that they were married under Kikuyu customary law to Simon Shiels. After her death, Simon moved to court seeking letters of administration, positioning himself as the rightful administrator of her state. But that application sparked outrage and resistance. Her former husband, Amos Okoth Oluoch, alongside her children, contested Simon's claims. They argued that Jacinta had never married him, that Simon was exaggerating his closeness, and that he was eyeing her property. Suddenly, the cause of death wasn't the only mystery. The meaning of her relationship became a puzzle with massive financial stakes. But first, the crash. Witnesses reported that before Jacinta boarded the boda that night, she and Simon had been arguing. Some said she jumped on the motorcycle to leave. Some claimed Simon pursued her in his car, and others went as far as to suggest it wasn't an accident, that he deliberately rammed the boda. Whether these claims were accurate or emotional exaggeration, the post-mortem spoke loudly. Jacinta died from hemorrhage, shock after suffering severe head injury, the kind caused by significant impact, not a light bump. Despite the severity, authorities initially charged Simon with dangerous driving, not murder, and for years the case sat quietly, almost forgotten. In 2002, something shifted. The DPP ordered the file to be reopened and the charges upgraded to murder. That only happened when investigators believed there is evidence of intent or at least gross disregard for life. Simon was arrested, taken to court, and charged with killing Jecinter. He pleaded not guilty and insisted the crash was a tragic accident. The court granted him bail on a 300,000 Kenyan shillings cash bail and required him to surrender his passport. For the first time since 2018, the public had Jacinta's name again, but this time tied to murder charges. What had once looked like a traffic accident now smelled like something far more sinister. Meanwhile, the war over her state exploded. In 2020, the High Court in Malindi delivered a ruling that would shape everything that came after. Judge Nyakundi examined Simon's claims that he and Jacinta were married under Kikuyu customary law. There was no certificate, but there was evidence of cohabitation. Evidence from local chiefs and testimony suggests they lived as husband and wife. The court concluded that their relationship had the weight of a marriage, even without formal registration. It was a legal presumption that transformed Simon from boyfriend to spouse. But Jacinta's children and her former husband did not accept the decision. In 2021, they filed fresh application to revoke the grant of letters issued to Simon, accusing him of fraud, concealment, and manipulating the courts. They argued that this relationship with Jacinta was short-lived, exaggerated, and motivated by greed. Simon fired back, insisting the union was real, long-term, and recognized by family and community. The emotional temperature in courtrooms spiked. These weren't just legal arguments, these were people fighting over the memory of a dead woman and the control of her legacy. Throughout 2021, rulings continued and the court consistently upheld the recognition of Simon as Jacinta's spouse. Judges reaffirmed that cohabitation, family acknowledgement, and public recognition all supported a presumption of marriage. Whether or not Jacinta considered itself formal, the law accepted it, and that meant Simon retained control over her state. But the property battle continued and intensified. In 2024, the High Court issued orders authorizing entry into Jacinta's properties in Malindi to secure assets. And later that year, another ruling dismissed a review application by her relatives who were still fighting to overturn Simon's administration authority. By this time, the criminal case still hung over everything. A murder charge doesn't disappear easily. The prosecution believed the crash wasn't accidental, that Simon chased her, hit her, and killed her. The defense maintained it was a tragic collision fueled by emotions, not intentions. But the presence of the inheritance dispute gave the story of heavy shadow. Could motive be tied to property? Was there financial incentive, or was this simply the tragic end of a heated argument between partners who loved but fought? The courts, on other side, had to walk a tightrope between emotion and evidence. Beyond the legal details, the case exposes deeper societal questions. Jacinta was a woman with assets, property, businesses, and lands. In many communities, a woman's wealth becomes contested territory once she dies. Everyone wants a piece. The children believe the estate should be theirs. The former husband disputes legitimacy. The foreign partner claims marital rights. The court become arenas where love, money, and memory clash violently. And Jacinta's case highlights exactly how messy succession becomes when relationships are complicated and the paper trails are thin. Relationship between Kenya's women and foreign men have long carried layers, economic imbalance, cultural differences, and community suspicion. When tragedy strikes, these layers become magnified. Was someone treated with some suspicion because he was a foreigner, or was he treated too gently because of the same reason? Why did the authorities wait 4 years before upgrading the charges? The case raised uncomfortable questions about justice, privilege, and whose voice gets heard when truth becomes tangled. Today, the case remains open on both fronts. The murder charge will still stand. Simon is out on bail awaiting full trial. The estate battles continue through appeals, reviews, and fresh filings. The courts are still untangling who gets what, not just money, but memory, narrative, and legitimacy. And in the middle of all this is Jecinter, who cannot speak for herself, a woman whose last moments were chaotic and violent, a woman whose absence created a vacuum that everyone is trying to fill with their own version of truth. This case lingers because it hits nerves. It blends love with suspicion, grief with strategy, justice with inheritance. It shows how one moment, that single crash, can shatter not just a life, but an entire family structure. It shows how the dead can be fought over as fiercely as the living. And it shows how power plays out when one person's story is left for others to rewrite. Jacinta Njoki died on a lonely road, but her story refuses to stay buried here. Her name continues to echo through court corridor, whispered by lawyers, recited in affidavits, and argued by people who swear they knew her best. But in truth, only Jacinta knew the full story of her relationship with Simon. Only she knew whether that night was an accident waiting to happen or something darker, and because she can't tell us, we are left with fragments, witness claims, legal documents, injuries, property lists, arguments, and a collision with too many versions. Her story is far more from over, and maybe that's why it holds so much power, because it's still unfolding, still raw, still uncertain. The collision was the end of her life, but the beginning of a long and brutal fight over everything she touched. The courts will decide the legal truth, but the emotional truth, that one sits heavy, unresolved, and still in motion.